Welcome back to another episode of I Wish They Knew, a show where we share big ideas that deserve more attention in about the time it takes to enjoy a cup of coffee. I'm Joe Hirsch. Today's wish comes from Sheri Jacobs. Sheri is the founder and CEO of Avenue M Group, a global keynote speaker and a 3-time best-selling author. She's also a wildlife photographer and has competed and completed 18 marathons. I'm still working my way up to one, but I'm getting there. Sheri, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joe. It's such a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you on board. So tell me, what do you wish more people knew?
I wish they knew their failure boundaries. I wish people could assess their capacity for change and know their failure boundaries. Without understanding your failure boundaries, people are going to stay close to what they know, what has always worked in the past, rather than exploring, rather than saying, okay, this is how far we can go. Even if we fail, even if these ideas don't work, we can still come back. There's still safety in that. So that is the thing I wish people knew.
And so one of the ways to really get ahead of that curve and embrace those failures along the way is, as you like to say, take more shots. And when it comes to finessing a new skill or learning a new strategy, it really does come from that frequency, taking the reps. I'm curious, though, at what point does this embrace of failure and pushing our boundaries and taking more shots, when does this become a misuse of our time and our resources? And I guess to put it a different way, when is the right time to stop taking shots and to start changing tactics?
That's a great question. And it really comes down to when you're not learning anymore. So it's not taking shots for the sake of taking shots in most situations. There should always be every goal that an organization, a leader sets should always actually have 2 goals. One goal is success, right? They've already established what success will look like of every shot you take. The second goal should be, what can we learn? So when you are taking more shots, it's essential that you have that mindset of, can we learn something from this? So for example, I worked at a startup many years ago, and the startup made it. And one of the things that we did was we created the Best New Mistake Award. And the Best New Mistake Award was monetary. People could self-nominate and they can earn it. They can win the award if they made a mistake, but learned something from it, said what they learned, and that changed the process. So this is a company that is starting up and competing with the big players out there, but was able to succeed and to grow and become the largest in this vertical because I believe we created that safe space for learning in creating that Best New Mistake Award.
And so it's almost like this normalization of failure, but also the celebration of the learning that comes from failure. That's one of the ways that organizations can sort of stretch those boundaries, push past the failures, and ultimately get to learning and growth.
Right, exactly. And that's not going to happen unless you know where your failure boundaries are, that you've created that safe space for learning and experimenting, but also having your team know, like, you're not just randomly taking more shots, you're taking them within that context of how the organization can grow and thrive.
So how would you advise we go about setting those boundaries to begin with? Because it seems like there's a lot of factors that come into that. It's cultural, it's market pressures, it's your product line. There's so many things that have to be accounted for when trying to set those boundaries for failure and for growth. Where do you start?
So there's 3 things that I say. You start with making sure that every voice can be heard. Now, while that's easy to say, and actually executing on that is very difficult because I talk about this, about people don't have survey fatigue, they have inaction fatigue, right? So making sure that every voice is heard, but knowing these are the priorities that I have right now. It's important. I want everyone's feedback, but these are my priorities. Making sure you say, when I share these priorities, I want your feedback on it. And then demonstrating that you're listening, that you are taking action. And there are a couple different ways that you can do that. You can, look at creating like an action plan where, you say, this is the one priority. These are the 2 things I'm going to do about it. And I'm going to check in 3 times, right? That's setting the stage so that you have those ideas coming forward. That's make every voice heard. The second is assessing your capacity for change. So that's where you need to really fully understand how far you can go. What if we fail? What will happen? Can we recover? That's an important question because sometimes the answer is no. So I remember a long time ago, a boss of mine said that he learned from another boss was a really good CEO never bets a company, but occasionally bets their job. They put their job on the line. And I'll never forget when he just shared that with me. And I thought, that's exactly it. You don't put the company on line, but you do take some risks that you can recover from, because not all of them will succeed, but some of them are going to get you forward. And then the third is to take more shots and to really think about how can we do that? How can we create that culture of experimentation where goals are always set? Two goals are always set: one for success, one for learning.
And so if you take into account all those different voices and then take those measured, intelligent risks, what Amy Edmondson calls intelligent failures, that kind of boundary pushing is ultimately what's going to lead to more insights and more risk taking and ultimately more learning.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love her work. I've read a lot about the Good Catch programs that a lot of hospitals have put into place. Good catch is we've made a mistake, but we caught it before it became too big. That is creating that environment where people are unafraid to try things, to make mistakes, to report them, and so that the entire organization could learn and grow and get better.
What would you tell a leader whose organization, whose company is facing tremendous short-term pressures? Maybe that's in the form of meeting quarterly earnings or worrying about the stock price. How can leaders who are focusing on the very near term create more long-term space to be able to anticipate and to project and navigate that more effectively?
That's probably the hardest thing, right? Because they're so focused on a couple things. One, if I try something new, like if I stay the course, if I stay with what I know that has worked, I can predict the results, even if those results aren't going to get me where I need to go, right? They don't even realize that playbook they've had is actually, that past success has actually created a ceiling they didn't realize they hit, because that's predictable, it's certain, it's safe. And there's that feeling that what I don't try is, what I might try that I've never tried before, that failure is the riskier move. But over and over again, we have seen the data. I've actually surveyed nearly 1 million people over the last 15 years. And the one thing that I have found, the common thread, is that every single person knows that change is happening rapidly and that they are afraid to make that move and they are comfortable in that safe space. However, the data also shows that the organizations that set aside a small amount of budget and time, 20%, 10%, that allow for the goals of that is not to succeed with these experiments, but just to try them, are the ones that actually move forward. So for those leaders that are facing those short-term, we need to do something right now, even if they can keep 80 or 90% with the old playbook, but allow for some space that the measurements of success aren't the success, but are the learning, then they are starting to build that culture where they're just starting to take steps in that. And that's more of a realistic approach.
Yeah. So instead of big swings, more like steady steps.
Exactly. Small steps. They don't have to be huge experiments, but they do have to have some experiments. Do the experiment, right? Take the shot.
Exactly. So managing through the uncertainty of change, it puts a lot of strain on the leaders and also their teams. What are some of the strategies that you found to be particularly effective when it comes to communicating change and guiding others through it?
I think one, and we've all heard this many times, is there has to be a lot of transparency around everything you're doing. So transparency around if you're asking for feedback, if you are going through a process, explaining why you are doing these changes, why you are asking for feedback, what you plan to do with it. The number one obviously has to be the transparency around that. Two is really leaning in to making sure that people know that you're not perfect, that, it's okay. Not only do you not expect everybody else to be perfect, but that you're also not perfect. And three is celebrating not just success, but celebrating everything that happens. I do this with my own company. I've run a company for 15 years. And we're a very successful company, and I have a team. And when we do something and it doesn't produce the results that we expected, I always celebrate. I mean, now we know what not to do, what's not working right here. And at first, my team would look at me and say, really? I'm like, yes, we have to celebrate the wins and the misses, because we've expanded what we know, how we know to move forward. So that celebration of the effort is critical too.
Yeah, when you learn, you still win, even if you lose.
100%. 100. And I have a long list of things where I have succeeded and where I have learned.
Yes, that's good. It's only a failure if you fail to learn.
Correct.
So we've spent a lot of time talking about, this change at an organizational level and how it affects different pieces of an organization and things that organizations can do to make that management a little bit easier and more effective. But change hits each and every one of us in different ways. And for listeners out there who are thinking about making a change in their lives personally, make the case for taking more shots.
So I've always been somebody that was pretty much unafraid of risk. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I started my own business. So I'm not somebody you would think that would hold back, on things that I wanted to do. But the reality is we all do. So even somebody is like me, I was holding back on ideas that I wanted to do, activities I wanted to do. I just thought, one day I'll have time for that, like we all do. And about 4 years ago, I went into the doctor thinking, oh, I just need to have some heartburn and maybe they're going to prescribe some medication for it. And after a series of tests, I found out that I had a benign pancreatic tumor. Now, it's benign, but you can't do anything about it. It was inoperable. So the feedback I got was, we're just going to have to monitor it, Sheri, every year. And I thought, wow, this is it. Like every year I would go in and I thought, my life may change today because, if it's inoperable and it does turn into cancer, that's it. That's the end. So when I got that news, I started just doing things differently. I raised thousands of dollars for pancreatic cancer and ran London Marathon and the Boston Marathon. And I summited a mountain that I always wanted to do. And I picked up a camera and I started taking photos again. I used to be a photojournalist. And I started photographing wildlife in Antarctica to Zambia. So I travel around the world and I had all these adventures. I got married. I moved to Colorado. I did all these things. And I went in last November and to get the MRI thinking, is this the year it's going to change? And I got the best news you can ever imagine. The tumor had disappeared. And as I sat there, I thought, I'm not lucky because it disappeared. I'm lucky because it appeared in the first place, because it taught me that you don't wait for things to happen, and even someone like me who does live life to the fullest, it really taught me that, it's just uncertain, that future. So we need to just pursue the things that we want to do today, because that tomorrow's not promised.
Sheri Jacobs, thanks for taking those shots and for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Joe. It's truly my pleasure.